Yo! Video games.
What up, dudes, and welcome back to the YoVideogames podcast. I'm Matt.
And I'm Andrew.
And once again, thank you to all our generous sponsors and producers who've kept us going for over 390 episodes.
Yeah, if you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames Dude of the week is Toten. Thank you, Toten.
Thank you, Toten.
We also have a sponsor to thank. And of course, we're talking about Manscaped. And I have our current favorite, maybe our favorite of all time product, the Beard Hedger Pro. Now, you don't have to just listen to me now because Matt finally has one and he likes it too. But a slight anecdote, I just got back from Missouri. It was like 95 degrees every day and there was like 80% humidity. It was ridiculous.
But this
guy was so good at keeping my neck clean and my pits. My pit's short, so I didn't sweat nearly as much as I could have. And when I was at the wedding that I was at and in a full suit with a vest and all that stuff, man, I smelled so fresh, so nice. Actually, people made jokes about it. One guy was just kind of like, just go stand in front of the swamp cooler so that the air blows past your balls and it smells great in here. So
right off the ball, Joe, which is not part of the package here, but it is something you can get from Manscaped.
It's the thing that we used first at my bachelor party. Was given to me as a gift from actually the person whose wedding I was at, my friend Geraldo. But it just ball deodorant, the crop preserver, is a fantastic product, and it sort of entered us into the Manscaped ecosystem.
Yes,
got us into the lawnmower. And then, of course, there's the Beard Hedger Pro kit where you have everything from scissors and brushes and
and that's something I can't even say. And I've attested this to other friends of mine as well. Is that this is probably the smoothest, best working face. What do you call these?
Beard trimmer.
Beard trimmer. Just what is a beard trimmer? It's the smoothest, fastest, easiest working beard trimmer I've ever had. Like it works out of the box smoothly and perfectly in a way none of these things have ever done, ever.
Yeah, not for me at least.
And I've gone through a few of these things in my life, honestly. I really have. And this one is really great because of the dial on the middle, which means you don't have to constantly
remove anything to adjust.
The only thing you take this off for is just to clean it. But you don't have to adjust, or have different, slide it down or up or anything. Like, no, it's just it all works off your thumb. It's got a little radius and everything. So I mean, really, if you're not into the whole, I don't want my dick to look good, I don't want to buy, you're somehow afraid of your tree looking bigger, and you just want to stick to like tired and true safety measures of your face with the beard hedger. Like, we could say this, like, the beard hedger is the best beard hedger I've ever used. So you've ever used. So
it's a safe thing to say. Ones I've had in the past with like removable heads and all that stuff. I've had bad experience clippings where the heads have twisted off and stuff. Don't have to worry about any of that with this, and I really like it. But if you're interested in checking out any of their products, from the Crop Preserver to the Beard Hedger Pro, please head over to manscaped.com. Use our code YoVG, all caps, for 20% off and free shipping worldwide. That's code YoVG, all caps, at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping worldwide. Your balls will thank you.
So will your chinny chin chin.
You can be the big bad wolf.
Big bad wolf with big bad balls.
That's actually, I'm getting a tattoo, and that's actually what it's going to say. I'm the big bad wolf with the big bad balls.
With the big bad ball.
But speaking about big and bad, we're going to talk about open world games today. That's why I'm wearing my Zelda shirt.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Zelda shirt. Zelda represent. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Oh, yeah. We're both wearing Zelda shirts.
Zelda shirts.
Yeah. So I got to play Final Fantasy 16, got back, had bought the game before I had left, got back from the wedding, and played it for most of a day. So I'm like 6 or so hours, 7 hours.
Oh, so you're like into it then?
Yeah, I'm into it now. Yeah, I'm not. I was afraid I was only going to get through basically the prologue area, but no, now I'm into it, and so I have a good good feel for it. I'm really liking
Yeah.
it. It's exactly, I feel like it is exactly what was promised, and it's exactly what I wanted. And so I'm not upset, but I have seen a lot of like the reviewers and tweets where people are pissed at it.
Yeah,
One of the
it's
things,
actually it's very funny what they are, but go on.
well, one of the things that people are mad about is what I'm the most confused about, and what inspired this episode is where people are all like, "Oh, it's not an open world experience. It's not a true open world experience. It's not what they promised." Never at any time did they promise that it was going to be open world.
No,
One, Square
there
Enix doesn't even like open world games. They've said that in the past. Yes, Final Fantasy 14 is technically open world, but
well, it's an MMO, but
yeah, it's an MMO. It doesn't. I don't know that it really counts in the same way. No, they've said this was going to be an action game, an action RPG.
yeah, there was a demonstration at PAX this year where Yoshi P wanted to directly address. People were saying that, oh, it's all going to be just corridors and hallways. He's like, no, that's not true. We have big areas. And he showed a gameplay demonstration of something further in the game. I was like, no, there's big areas in the game. He never said it was an open world game though.
And
He
there
just
is
said
big
no, there
areas,
will
but
be big. He says no, there are big areas in the game. It's not just cinematic,
right.
levels or whatever, like hallways. And that's true.
And my understanding is the Japanese devs have never really liked open world too much anyway.
Yeah, I mean, just from a very purely overarching game design philosophy, they very much like the tailored, sort of guided experience.
Right,
And there
because
there
then
was
you've
a
got the rhythm of the game, really.
yeah, and then there was a while there where like Zelda and team in particular was super afraid of the player getting too lost, too confused, and not knowing where to go. And things got super hand holding. And it kind of end gamed itself into Skyward Sword, one of the worst Zelda games.
Hmm.
And that's why Breath of the Wild, was a reverse of that, completely opposite, and it was super successful. So on its face, it's kind of interesting in a sense where it's like, yeah, like the Zelda team had the thing where they went more and more and more linear to the point that like the game had no exploration, no discovery, whatever, and then they pivoted 180 degrees, and it was the most successful thing they've ever done for the franchise was going giant open world.
Hmm.
So that was a major success story. They never really said they never especially for 16, they never said 16 was going to do that. They kind of were saying that was 15. 15 was always kind of the one that's like, this is going to be the big open worldy Final Fantasy, and it's kind of true, kind of, but 15 is just a fucking mess. Um,
And it's a mess for a lot of reasons. Open world isn't the reason that it's a mess, but
yeah.
I don't know that I would call 15 all that open world.
Here's the thing: is like once you get past the whole, can they do it? Will they do it? Won't they do it? Whatever. You come to the real actual problem. I feel like I'm jumping ahead here, but like, what is the actual problem with an open world? Is level design, map design,
Right, yeah,
and
it
it's
ends up
not
being
easy.
empty. Yeah.
It's not easy to do. I don't even know that Zelda necessarily does it. I think Zelda mostly succeeds at it, but like I don't know if I would even say Zelda 100% succeeds at it. Zelda succeeds at the map design. I don't know if Zelda succeeds at the loot, if you will, treasure placement, if you will. That's a whole nother discussion,
Right,
probably.
and one of the biggest problems that happens with open world that's not done well is that vast swaths of the world are not worth going to. And
Mhm.
so you have a few points of interest and a lot of shit that you don't care about. Now, granted, I think one of the ways that, say, like Bethesda tried to get around it is like having hidden little barrows and dungeons that
Yeah.
don't get talked about that you have to just stumble upon. Okay, that's cool, but there's still very little in, a big open world like that. They like one of my biggest problems with Fallout 4, for instance, is there's not really a lot of reason to wander around.
Yeah.
You go point to point to point anyway. I like open world games generally. I like exploring and stuff, but I think the pendulum has flown or swung too far one way where it's like everything's got to be open world now. And I would argue that one of the reasons that Japanese developers are so good at developing games is the philosophy of intention. Um, and I don't
Mhm.
know. I'm sure every developer wants to have intention in their game, or it goes for intention. They're focusing on intention, but like there seems like JRPGs and Japanese action game, well, Japanese games in general, just seem like that's a core principle of game development, is like, what is the intention for every section of the game? And open world is really hard to keep that. Like with The Witcher 3 is a great open world game. And I would actually argue is probably one of the better open world games in terms of like having variety and reasons to go look
Mhm.
at places. You know, you'll come upon a village that actually has something cool there, like a witch or not a witch, but like a ghost or a spirit or something that you have to like get
Yeah.
rid of. And it has nothing to do with the main story. You just kind of like come upon this area where you're going to do your job as a witcher. Um, but even then, you could skip whole swaths of that game. You could just like charge on, do just the main story and ignore everything else. And if you do just the main story in an open world game, what does it become? It becomes a linear action game most of
Yeah.
the time, right? So I'm just saying that Final Fantasy 16 just seems like that's basically they gave you some side quests, but for the most part, it's a linear action game um, with plenty of role playing. Uh, I would say elements. I know a lot of people said that they didn't get those elements
Yeah,
from it.
and I kind of felt like this because we had that press preview day, and this was like my main takeaway from it is that like there's not a lot of heavy RPG mechanics in this game, and I think that some people they're gonna kind of hate that for some reason, but I personally don't miss it that much.
What do you mean by heavy RPG mechanics, though?
So like okay, so in the game you have your sword, you have a ring, and you have I'm sorry, you have your sword, you have like a
Your belt.
breastplate, and yeah, your belt, and you have a bracer. Those are the three things you could equip. And then there's three, you can have three rings you can equip.
Hmm.
Equip. But
Okay.
anyway, so like the sword is the sword, it's your weapon. And then your bracelet and your belt, they give you like one stat. It's like they're both like defense. And then sometimes
Right.
they'll give you like better stagger or a little more HP.
Right.
Very, very, very simple. And then you got like the three rings at the bottom. Some of that is just used for like easy mode stuff, and some of it is just this makes this move cool down. A lot of it is like makes this move cool down quicker.
Oh, side note, by the way, I think I accidentally screwed myself out of getting a trophy because I was trying to put on an amulet and I accidentally put on one of those like easy mode things.
Mm.
And then immediately switched it, but I was like, "Damn it, I already equipped it." I bet you there's like a never equipped easy mode, whatever the hell
I don't know. I actually
trophy.
always keep the dog one equipped because I don't like having to like manage the
Micromanage the
dog.
dog. Yeah, I'm tempted.
I honestly, I the game's just more. It's just better when Torgal's just doing his thing with the AI. I
Yeah,
don't want to get. I don't want to give him commands. Forget it. Um. So yeah. So there's that. So there's like okay. So in that sense, right? Like there's no like spell. Like okay, I equip
right.
this spell and then I level up this spell like
It is
fire
very
to
simplified.
Fira to Firaga to Curaga, Blizzaga, Thunder to Thundaga, stuff like that.
Right.
You don't like do anything like that. You don't have any sort of like spell thing. You
There's
have
no materia slots.
you
There's
have like
no yeah.
the icon abilities, which as you get more of them, and then you basically tab over, which they give you special moves. They don't give you necessarily spells, so to speak, right?
Hmm.
Like you get basically more moves to do in combat. It's not so it's very, very surface level stuff, right?
Right.
There's no like job class system. There's no like none of that stuff. There's no filling out your taxes to play a video game
Right.
stuff in the
Well,
menu of the
and
game.
I
Like you
will I will say yes, like again in The Witcher 3 to draw a comparison, you have all that stuff and I did love that. And
Mhm.
in other Final Fantasies you get to choose your materia, choose your spells and stuff and I do like that. I just don't necessarily think that that ruins the game not having that
Not at
stuff.
all,
Yeah.
personally, but 'cause the thing is I don't
Yeah.
really to me, like, having some really large in-depth I mean, I get why people like that because for them it tickles a part of the brain that's all about, like, sort of
Min-maxing.
min-maxing and menu management and puzzle solving in a way which this game just doesn't have because that's one thing you can say about the game too, is that, like, well, there's not puzzles, there's not dungeons, there's not really there is just areas where you kill things,
Right.
on your on your way to finish a quest line, finish a story segment.
Yeah, and you might have to come back.
Yeah, maybe
Which
for
I haven't had to do that yet, but I have a feeling that'll be the thing I don't like about the game is backtracking. If there's backtracking,
I mean, if you're sticking to the main quest stuff, it's very minor. Like,
yeah, and I'm doing side quests too as I find them.
yeah.
But
So the side quests. Here's the thing. If I want to level criticism at this game, I'll level my criticism for 16 right now, and I'm not done with it. I'm not finished, but like, I think the side quests are garbage.
so far they have been like the most annoying thing about the game.
Yeah, the side quests are fucking garbage.
Get me what? Well, you can see 14 in them, right?
Right.
You can see the MMO influence there, where it's all like, get me wood, get me soil, get go get the carpenter, that kind of stuff. You can definitely see the influence 14 had. I would also say you can see the influence that the MMOs had in the movement. Like there's a weightless quality to the movement and that like happens in MMOs a lot.
I mean, it's based off the same engine and stuff too, so
Yeah.
I guess it really kind of makes sense.
But once
It's
you're
funny
in
because
combat,
when you're in
pretty good.
combat, it's fucking great. I love it.
Yeah.
And like halfway through the game, you start getting quest lines. The side quests have plus markers, which is basically signifying this is story important, or this has like world lore, character lore building stuff. So like it in this weird way, like the devs even know that their side quests fucking suck. So that when they had a side quest that was somewhat important to like main characters or plot line, they literally put a symbol in there like you should probably do this one.
This one, I guess. Yeah.
Do this one. And I did one of them, and it led to a great fight, but it was like story-wise, it was like, okay. It was a nothing burger. Of a side quest story wise, even though it had the plus on it, but it led to a great fucking fight, and it got me a cool weapon. So I was like, all right, well, worth it.
I one thing, by the way, this is an aside. I still love that there's like the peculiar Japanese trope of like old man, like where Sid's an old man, but he looks like he's 35 and just like smoking hot. Like
just
like, is he supposed to be 60 or is he supposed he's just a fucking 35
well-traveled world warrior, 30 years old or whatever.
He's 30 years old and like Sid's like 20 or not Sid,
Well,
Clive is like 25.
Yeah, well, get ready because this is not really a spoiler, but you play Clive at 3 stages of his life. You played it. You already played him as a teenager. You played him as a 25-year-old. You're gonna play him when he's in his 30s, too. So,
and he's gonna be an old man.
it's funny because it doesn't really play off. I mean, it does and it doesn't. You'll see what they kind of do, but yeah, it definitely has
Clive.
that. It definitely has that vibe of like the grizzled veteran. And it's like here in America, when we talk about like a grizzled old man adventurer, we're talking about Harrison Ford playing Indiana Jones at 80 years old.
I would say that
literally 80. In Japan is like this guy's real like this old, worry Trevor. He's 32 years old.
Right. Okay. It's like I'm 34. Actually, the side note where I was talking to some friends where I was like, I still feel young, and my other buddy was like, yeah, I still feel like I'm in my 20s, but now I have gout. And you're like, what?
Wow.
That is some old man shit. But yeah, no, I mean, when I think like grizzled veteran, I'm like, oh, he's 50 years old and he's got 20 to 30 years experience depending on how young he started at whatever he's doing. And it's like at 50 years old you could still be a beast. But no, like for Japan, it's a grizzled veteran. Like super experienced in Japan seems like it's 10 years. Like 10 years is when you're like, oh man, I made Lord Commander in record time, 1 year. Oh, dude's 16. He's 17-year-old Lord Commander.
Yeah.
Amazing prodigy. Normally they don't become Lord Commander until they're 22. It's like holy shit. I will forever find that funny and weird. I'm sure there's plenty of American tropes that seem super fucking
it's
weird,
also funny because it's an aging country. Like statistically speaking, most of them are old, like past or hitting our senior citizen age. And yet they don't really have any love for old like stories about older people or older characters. It's really bizarre when you really think about it because it's it's not even like the target audience, you know, of basically much older people still want to just they'd rather be playing as 20 or okay.
Yeah, I
I
guess that's
mean,
fair.
and then, well, I mean, kind of like sort of leading into that, like my other real kind of complaint with the game, and I think you're far enough to sort of see what I mean here, is that the game's a little dry with the characters wise. I mean, because they're very
Um,
much going for they've obvious have said it over and over, Game of Thrones sort of style aesthetic, where there's things are basically just very much there's not a lot of levity in this game. And
e
it's not really a game that like it like, wants to have it or really like,
needs it, I
should
guess, but
needs it or whatever. Yeah, but it comes off as a little like dry. Clive's dry. Clive has a I mean, the thing is, it's a weird thing because like he has a very good reason to be dry because he was press ganged into like military service at, at
mhm,
15 years old or whatever. Or 15, 13, whatever the fuck it was. Yeah, he was like, so he's basically been press ganged and he's basically been branded as, as they say, and stuff like that. So it's kind of like this isn't really a story that would necessarily want to have a lot of levity in it or whatever. It's like this guy's like, "Oh, these chocobos have gotten into my stock. Can you deliver this parcel for me?"
yeah,
Like that's the levity you get in the game.
right. I mean, Sid has some levity and stuff, but I
Yeah,
do, it is
kind of.
something I think that's another cultural difference is, like, for maybe an American or I'd say maybe Western is a better way to put it, like, a character like Clive in a Western story would probably be, uh, devil may care,
Yeah,
kinda like, has stopped giving a shit, sorta like, where
yeah.
he's
He's
fatalist and he's, a dark sense of humor and
yeah. See, what he doesn't have that even like something like The Witcher does is that Witcher like Jerry always has some sort of like really
sarcastic or yeah.
sarcastic, cynical,
He has a dry wit, yeah.
yeah, dry wit, or is just kind of like, "Oh, great, find your bullshit.
Yep,
Yeah, of course. What was I thinking?" Clive doesn't even
right,
have anything like that. He's just, "All right, I'll do it."
yeah. Me? I'm sad. I'm just a sad man. I'm not even a sad dad yet. No, I guess I'll see more of that and stuff.
Or you
Um,
won't, in a manner of speaking.
yeah, well, uh, yeah, there's
It's
always
just
gonna
it's just
be
it's just kinda dry, like, for
well,
me,
it's
which I
the
kinda
least
noticed.
anime that I think a Final Fantasy's been
Yeah,
that I've played.
and then there's things where, like, every 6 to 10 hours, they introduce some segment of the game that's very anime in a different way because it's icons, right? And,
Mhm.
and and I don't think this is really spoilers to say like
Kaiju.
you get these icon battles and it's super fucking anime because you got these
Yeah.
big fucking kaijus like rah,
Oh my god.
going fucking crazy, right?
Get your dick so hard.
Right. So you do get like those it gets anime in the sort of like over the top crazy kaiju fight way.
Mhm.
And then that goes away for a very long time. And then before you get to like the next time you see like some big icon, you know, crazy fight right there. So it is kind of like weird. We're like, and I don't know if you've gotten it like early. I don't know if you're at the part in the game yet necessarily. There's this part in the game where you see two of the icons. Like there's two armies fighting,
Mhm.
and there's two icons, and they basically fight each other for a bit, and then like they break off, and then that's it. And it's like it's from two countries that you pretty much haven't seen in the game yet, and two icons you hadn't seen yet, and they're out and they just go like they do this thing where it's like meanwhile, and like two
Oh,
icons are fighting, and then like okay, who are these guys? New characters? Like, and they do not fucking go back to those characters for many hours. It's kind of like, oh yeah, we just want to let you know that there are other parts of the world where other countries are fighting each other and other people have icons that they turn into, and that's kind of fucking it.
yeah, it's like they're hinting that there's some great world war going on
Yeah.
where it's like the Empire's fighting the Royalists on one front and the Royalists are kind of destabilizing everyone around them. I don't
Mhm.
it, there is you can definitely see the Game of Thrones influence, but I also think that there's like a Game of Thrones was really contained. And so the wars, like the battles that happened after. Like the game itself is all intrigue. Whereas this, it's like it's trying to be all battles right now. Like the battles started immediately type thing.
Yeah, it's just there's and I don't really know how you do it, but like you will notice how this game has a lot going on, and they'll do things where they'll cut away. This is what's happening way over here. It's not going to be really. It'll be important
later.
It's going to be important later, and we kind of
that's
need
why
to.
they have that active thing where you can hit.
Yeah, the active lore thing. So there's a little bit of weirdness to that because here's another weird thing about the game in a way where it's like because Clive is the main character and Clive is the only character you really control, right?
Yeah.
So and there's no party. There's kind of a party. Like Sid will join you. You know, he'll be with you kind of, right?
Yeah.
But
or
you're not
Jill.
Yeah, or Jill. Yeah. So you're not going on like a world journey where it's like you have this group of this ensemble cast. And the cast basically encounters the world as they walk across it, right? Doesn't have that going on. It's like you're this guy and you kind of got your shit going on, and then there's definitely all kinds of other shit going on in the rest of the world. We kind of need to explain that to you or tell or show it to you in some way, the player, because Clive himself is not going to personally encounter, these people, and like some of them I've still never encountered. I just I had
Oh,
one
you
cutscene.
never fight these people or encounter them?
There's some of them I haven't yet. I'm sure I will.
How many hours are you into the game?
Like 20.
Oh, wow.
So there's like two whole like sets of armies and peoples that like I've never fucking encountered.
That's
It it
crazy.
it took me forever just to encounter, just for Clive to meet the big Titan dude at the beginning.
Huh.
It took forever. I was like, man, okay. I mean, granted, he's literally fighting outside of Titan and Shiva, fighting at the very beginning of the game, like the opening thing. But
Right.
like when Clive actually talking to that guy, like having a conversation with him, like just doesn't happen till like fucking eons into the game. So
Wow. Well, so suffices to say that I am still I'm very much liking the game. But I didn't understand why people were mad at the game. And then I thought, like, is it because we've had so much open world that like that's the norm where like
yeah, I don't know, because you gotta wonder if there's like a recency bias here where like people are coming off Tears of the Kingdom and they're like they're following up Tears of the Kingdom with Final Fantasy 16 and they're basically opposite. They're
so
both medieval fantasy games, but they couldn't be further apart design wise, really.
And I
Um,
do think that sometimes it's easy to forget that, like, say, especially on Twitter, you could be interacting with a person where this is their first Final Fantasy.
mhm,
You know, it's not a niche anymore. Like this is all opened up. Like you could feasibly be interacting with a 13-year-old on Twitter who
mhm.
has only ever played open world RPGs and is like, "What the fuck is this?" Um, I, I don't know necessarily that they would be mad about it. I'm not trying to say like, hey, if you're 13, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. But
Well,
I
there
do
is
think
something to be said though, and Max told us that to this way. It's like think about it this way: 16 is the first Final Fantasy in how long where the story is easy to follow.
right. Yeah.
like
No, it's fair.
like compared to 15 and 13 and even 12, playing through 16, it is a very simple, easy, it is simple to follow what's going on in the game.
hmm And you have that compendium thing that comes up
And like,
for
on
anything you
top of the
forget.
compendium thing, because like 15 is hard to follow even when you know everything, because 15 had a prequel CG movie you needed to watch, and it
Right.
and it had a book, a literal light novel that came out to basically end and fix a bunch and fill in a bunch of other gaps that were supposed to be DLC that got canceled. 15's a mess.
Yeah.
And 13's a mess. And 12 is not exactly the easiest thing to follow either, although probably a little better than others. But yeah, it's like think about that. Like um this is the first time in a long, long time Final Fantasy's been pretty much like not difficult to it's not difficult to explain it either. Cause like yes, there's a lot of warring nations or whatever, but like if I tried to explain to you like the plot of 13 or even 15, it would probably come across as like, wait, what?
Right. Well, so again, I like open world games. Um, but I would actually say that Final Fantasy 16 is a really good argument as to why you don't why open world needs to like tone it the fuck down. Uh And I would actually say that the real best argument for why open world needs to tone it the fuck down is probably Red Dead 2, Red Dead Redemption 2 or whatever.
Yeah.
Because that's another game that like you can play for hours and hours and hours and still not get to the fucking point. And I think as games become much more story driven, as story matters more to the overall experience of the game, like story used to be an excuse to get you to play the fucking game. Now it's like as it gets more and more important, like with God of War, right? You played God of War because yeah, the action's cool, but also there's like a story that you were trying to complete from the first God of War, Dad of War fucking series. You know, as you get that like more pointed story, you need more pointed gameplay, and I don't think that open world lends itself to a story like they're trying to do in Final Fantasy 16. Now, actually, I would say, and I know it's not going to be open world, not really. Yes, people are saying, "Oh, the next Final Fantasy 7 remake is actually going to be open world." I don't think it is. I think it's going to be like this.
It'll be more than this. It's going to be wide linear.
Okay,
is what I would argue, but like
it's not going to be open world.
It's not going to be open world. It's not. You're not going to have access to the entirety of Gaia of the planet the minute you fucking start the game.
Right.
You're going to have very very strict pointed entry and exit points of the world map you're on. Right, like you can see it literally in the trailer and the footage.
Right.
You have the ocean on one side, and you have these snow-capped mountains on the other, and you're going basically up this chunk of land between those 2 points.
Yeah, you have very clear boundaries.
Right, and then that's exactly, and it even is like that in the original game where it's like, okay, like, and get out of Midgar, and there's the town of Calm, there's a chocobo farm, and there's a big swamp, and you have to get a chocobo to get across the swamp, and then once you get across swamp, you have to go into a cave, the Mithril Mines, and that's how they're going to separate it. Here's this chunk of land, and there'll be a bunch of stuff to do in this big chunk of land, but to progress the story, you come out of Midgar and you exit into the caves. A little up northeast of your location, right?
Right.
That's what it is. It's here's a point A, here's a point B. It's not going to be quite like Red Dead, where it's like Red Dead, like, okay, you get off that mountain off the beginning of Red Dead 2, you wander fucking everywhere in that game except down to the Red Dead 1 area. I can't remember what it is that they don't let you go down there.
Right.
I don't remember for whatever reason, but like you could just ride your horse for fucking eons.
Yeah, never even start the main story.
I mean, never start the main story. You'll get lost in the fucking bayou for all.
I played
all
like
you want to do.
9 hours of that game, and I don't think I ever progressed the story once.
Right, and that can happen. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, not with it. No, and Final Fantasy has always been about the story. Yes, it's all. I would argue that the stories have gotten better, probably, as time went on, just in terms of like how pointed they are. But
and this one in 16 is obviously, you can tell because you could tell that it was in like natively dubbed, you would in recorded in English.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is not a game that was made in Japanese and then they had an English VO, voiceover kind of replace. No, this was actually in Japan. It's like English is like the native language of the game. That is what they mocap. That is what they facial captured for the game, is English.
You could really tell that they were just really enjoying using like British colloquialisms like bugger and shit.
Yeah.
Like I wonder how many of the writers knew what buggery is though. I feel like they don't know that what they're saying there is butt fucking. Calling someone a bugger is calling them a butt fucker. Like, in case anybody's
not
wondering.
That they probably wouldn't even mind, because again, this is the M-rated Final Fantasy. There's a lot of F-bombs and stuff. So
man, there's some like right there in the beginning though. There's some crazy stuff where you're just like, oh yeah, I guess I wasn't expecting that, even though this is M-rated.
Yeah.
I would say that, like, yeah, I can see why there's people that are disappointed with this game if they were like really nostalgic for Final Fantasy as it was in the 7 8,
I
9
have
days.
to, yeah, but I have to sort of interject there and say like 7, 8, 9 days. Yeah, that is one console block, right?
Right.
Because this franchise changes itself up every fucking time. It's so, and a lot of, and people are fighting back on this notion now too. Where I'm like, this isn't my, like, what happened to Final Fantasy? And like, what is always done, fucking constantly change.
Right.
Like,
And I'm wondering who's writing the articles that they're like, oh, it doesn't have any of the things that make it Final Fantasy. It's like it hits almost every single thing that I can think of
yeah,
that makes it a Final
it's
Fantasy.
just, yeah, because like, for a long time, yeah, Final Fantasy was like strict turn based, and then it was ATB, active time battle, and that was kind of like that for a little while, right? But like, five, I mean, Final Fantasy 5 has this job class system, which 6 doesn't have.
Hmm.
6 has like characters who all have weird shit. Like one character, to do his super moves, you have to enter like Street Fighter inputs for him to do his super attacks in 6. Like that's a
Right.
thing. That's not a thing in 7. Seven's all about materia and plugging in different materia slots to different things, right? And then 8 has that weird draw junction system where like you pull literal quantities of spells out of enemies and then you use it against them because there's no MP.
Hmm.
Like that's super bizarre, right? It's still turn based, whatever. 9 goes back to super traditional, whatever. And then like 10 has its own weirdness a bit. And then 11's a fucking MMORPG. 12 is like this very weird game where it's all about like unlocking AI command prompts so the game plays itself and it does it in a real-time setting. Like 12 doesn't even go into a battle screen. So 12's a fucking odd duck, and 13 was a piece of shit, whatever. 14 is another MMO. Like 15 is weird too because 15 is real time. 15 is a real-time combat game. It's not
Right.
great. It's not great real-time combat, but it's still real-time combat. It's like this, what happened to Final Fantasy? I'm like, well, the last game was an action RPG. If anything, this is more similar to the one before it than anything, even though the last one was a little but
Well, I just don't. I guess I don't know what people are expecting from Final Fantasy. Like action is better. Like action in games, or I guess action games are better than they've ever been because you can get cleaner action, you can get better looking games, you can get like Final Fantasy is a flagship game of course it's going to go to where sort of like the best of games go, and everything's going towards action because real-time action is impressive and immersive.
yeah,
Yeah, being able to hop directly in, loading into a battle screen and all that's it. Like those weren't things that they did for style. They did that because of necessity.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And some people are like, well, I like that though. And here's the other thing though, too,
yeah,
is
which is
that
okay. It's okay to like that shit.
here's the
Like
thing, because like
I don't, but
games like Octopath Traveler 1 and 2, Bravely Default 1 and 2, like Square, a lot Live Alive, Square is still making turn-based RPGs.
right.
I haven't gone anywhere. Even fucking Yakuza games now are turn-based RPGs.
Yeah,
Um,
well, they're swinging back to
They
that
swing
too,
and
where it's
they
like
pivoted. They pivoted the other way, and why they're and to me it's like why do companies do this? Because they want to expand their audience.
mhm,
Because you get to that point what Resident Evil got to when it got to Code Veronica, where they kind of realized we've done everything we can do with this style of a game. We're not bringing in new people.
mhm,
Like maybe you bring in new people if you're there right at the console's launch and the game is a big graphical showpiece and people are just buying it to have a game to show off their new system, right? But
right.
that comes around less and less and less as consoles stay alive longer and longer and longer, right? So Final Fantasy is just to me is just kind of like doing what it has to do to bring in new people because God of War Ragnarok in 2018 they sell 10 million copies easy. They sell 10,
Mhm,
15, 20 million copies, whatever it is. And Final Fantasy's like, you know what? I think we can retain in their minds, they can retain the Final Fantasy essence of a game and they can get in a whole new audience of people who weren't gaming 10, 15 years ago. And that's the point. The point is to expand your audience. Like,
well, the other thing that I saw is like where people were like, "Oh, this Final Fantasy doesn't even hit the story element of a Final Fantasy." I'm like, "How does it not?" Magic is central, like
Magic Central, crystals are central, like
Moogles are
it's
there. No,
Mughals
but
are
it's world spanning. Your character is central to a changing time or to a changing world. Uh,
Mhm.
Central magic is central to the crystals, especially. God, they love crystals, but like crystals are central to the
Right, and
changing
that's
world.
like a staple of Final Fantasy. If
Yeah,
anything, like
this is
Fantasy.
it feels like they really returned to the staples of the series in a way that like 15 I didn't play I didn't play any of 15 actually really. I think I did the demo once when I was hanging with you guys or something, but um 15 didn't have nearly as many of these staples as far as I recall as 16 has in terms of like the
Yeah, like
rhythms or
yeah,
the
like
tropes of the series.
especially with like setting tone, like setting and crystals being such a major part. Uh, there is a because 15 is versus 13, which is based off the Fabula Novala Crystallis, whatever
Mhm.
thing, whatever. I mean, it's kind of there, but like in a weird sort of way, 16 has more story beats connections to the first Final Fantasy than many of the other Final Fantasies.
Right.
Honestly, like if you want to like split hairs there, it's like I think people to me, I'm like, there's all kinds of because there's multiple different people who are kind of like they have there's people who love the game and people who don't like the game have like there's different types, there's different reasons people don't like the game. But I think the crowd of like this isn't Final Fantasy is mostly looking at it from a turn-based battles
Right.
standpoint. Um and then there it is weird to me that there were and I said this kind of again from the media day. I'm like, people get this idea, and I feel they did it to themselves a little bit when they went out of their way at PAX to say we have big, large open areas. Here's a big, and they loaded up a thing. Here's a guy running around. I'm like, okay, now you're telling people the game is like this big, massive open world game. That's fucking not.
Right.
Because when I played the first open area you go to, the three marshes or whatever, I'm like, it's not that open. Like,
No, yeah, it's very much it feels like a dungeon.
yeah, it's like Clive can't go in water deeper than anything deeper than ankle deep.
Well, you don't
He
wanna ruin his boots or his buckles, man.
right, like
Again, a staple of Final
he
Fantasy.
can't go through large bushes. He can't climb up steep slopes. Like it's very rigid on where you can and can't walk on,
Right.
even in the big open field area or whatever.
Now, would I like this world to be open world? Yeah, it'd be cool. There's some parts of it that I wish I could go exploring more. I mean, parts of the forest where I was kinda like, "Oh, fuck, I wonder what's over there," or, like,
Yeah, yeah.
stuff
You
like that,
definitely you feel it in a few places, really. But again,
but I don't need it.
it reminds me a lot of God of War, like God of War Ragnarok.
Yes.
It
Yes.
really feels like they're sort of like their response to God of War Ragnarok. That's what this game feels like in
It
all.
does. I didn't wanna say that just because I wasn't sure if I was gonna sound like I was being a dick. Because there's a lot of people will be like, "Square Enix would never copy." I was like, "But it is a trend that they are following." They did
Yeah,
jump on this trend, and it does feel like this is very much like Square Enix. I wouldn't even necessarily say that they're chasing. I would say that this is like almost an acknowledgement from Square
yeah.
Enix, where they're almost kind of like, "Oh yeah, we see what you did. That was great. Here's our, take on
Yeah,
it."
it is their take. It is their Final Fantasy style take on the modern God of War. And God of War itself is also a game that pivoted from what it was to where it is now. They
Right.
changed up the gameplay in the a little bit because they wanted to bring in new people. They wanted to change the story, so um but again, we go all the way back, when we're talking, about like just the world design and all that other stuff here, it's like I 'cause, like, I'm about to have my own little gaming identity crisis. All the game not really, because there's so many games coming out this year, but, like, I'm done with Xenoblade now, so I'm like, "Where's my next
Yeah.
Xenoblade?" And it's like, you can't just jump onto anything else like it, because here's the thing about open world is I could play a lot of open world games, but they're not gonna be very good, and they're gonna, like, burn or bum me out real quick. Why? Because they're probably not designed super well. And
I
that's the thing is, like, you would rather and I say this, people would probably think I wouldn't, but I say this, I would rather have a well-designed, like, system of maps that 16 is, rather than have a shitty open world that just sort of exists to have raw space between points of interest and
w
nothing else.
not that I wanna shit on anyone in particular, but, like, do you have an example of what you're talking about when you say, like, a raw open world with nothing in it?
Well, I mean, you honestly, I'm honestly mostly thinking Skyrim a little bit.
Oof.
Because like Skyrim was just like here's just like shrubbery between here and this weird little dungeon or here in this town or whatever. But
I
Red
would say
Dead
like
on
No Man's Sky when it first
hmm.
launched, it's just big and it's empty. And the other, you can go anywhere in the world. There's nothing to see, but you can go anywhere you want.
It's a little easier of a pill to swallow if you have really cool travel movement mechanics.
Right.
Um, I don't know if you've played much of Tears of the Kingdom, but like the whole underground, and most people who love Tears of the Kingdom even fucking admit that the underground is kind of bullshit as well.
How
Um,
so?
because it's this fucking cave you can't see anything in, right? Like it's the underground, the depths, right?
Right.
And you go to it's literally if you go underneath every shrine in the world, there's like a big light route that lights up the area. But most of the underground looks fucking identical.
Mm.
And it's the whole fucking size of the entire world. Or there is a little bit of differences. There's some variation, but a little bit. But it's like it's basically you're underground. It's really dark. You can't see anything. It's just a lot of gray fucking rock
That makes sense though.
everywhere. And I'm like,
At least, I
and
mean,
there's this whole giant map. They're like, oh, there's all these things you can actually find in there. I'm like, I'm not fucking doing that. I don't care. Because one, I don't want to keep constantly throwing or shooting like light bulbs plants to like light up little
right.
areas so then I can get to the other area where I can like the big route that I can activate to like mostly light up the area around me and then go to the next route to light it up. And then what do you get? You basically get like an underground desert, like for the whole fucking map.
Well, this
That
is this is an additional perfect argument against open world in Final Fantasy. Like I don't
Yeah,
necessarily
like you look at the map, the whole little Game of Thrones looking pause menu map in that thing, and you're like, oh man, wouldn't it be cool if you could just walk? You could just see everything, as you're going from, like area to area, right? And it's like that's kind of true, but also like imagine if you will also what if there just wasn't fucking anything interesting,
right.
between say like Rosaria Castle and the Hideaway, and you basically just walked a massive fucking field
Well, that and think about
just
how
to
many
sort of like
years it
yeah.
would have taken to do anything interesting in that big of a field.
And that's the thing too about and this gets into a whole nother thing where it's like I think the game industry needs to learn how to properly learn how to do pre-production properly before they start tackling because part of me thinks there are people who are tackling open world in gaming before they're finalized with their pre-production. Like,
Right.
like you need to like everything needs to be there's a lot of stuff that goes on in pre-production. Like pre-production, it's usually people try to jump into production before pre-production's done, and that usually causes the whole thing to grind to a fucking halt, and they have to go back and finalize what the fuck they're doing in pre-production, and then go back to moving into full production. That's why you get games that take fucking forever to come out.
Right.
Because if you had if you had planned, okay, this is the zones of our open world. This is what they will be. This is what they will have in them, and we will fucking spend. We're gonna spend X amount of months for each zone, and you decide that before you make the zone, so that when you go into production, it's like to me a lot of it feels like open world games sometimes feel like movies made without a finished script.
Oh. Or like with a lot of like extra scenes.
Where it's like
Yeah.
I got this location, I got these actors, and I have the synopsis of what I'm gonna be filming, but I don't have a finished script. So, I forget what not what's the name, the script checker, the person who
Oh, the
I don't
script supervisor.
not script supervisor, the person who's just like the production coordinator who's trying to like make sure every shot's, filled in or whatever, like like an on-set editor. Like they're scrambling to make sure that the film's like this, the whole thing stays cohesive, right?
Right.
In which you hope when you get back to the editing bay that it is, and that you have all the shots you need. But it's like open world to me is like people jump into it because it's like okay, like we're gonna do this thing, it's gonna be great. We're gonna have like this, we're gonna have this cool fucking area. We're gonna have this shit's gonna happen, and it's like they don't have the finished script, so yeah, again, it's like going on location with your actors with a synopsis and not a finished script, and you basically ad lib the whole fucking movie.
I mean, I wish there wasn't directors that do that and do that well, but there are. But no, I agree. I think that open world, when it's done right, feels jam packed with life and things to look at,
Yeah.
things to do. And I think that it's really, really hard to do that because a lot of open world is focused on trying to make things bigger, not necessarily more
Yeah, and it kind
full.
of and it becomes this problem where the publisher wants that, right? Because they're like, this is what focus testing, this is what public opinion has said they
Right.
want. They want to be in this big living, breathing world, right? So it's like we're gonna have this, and we're gonna need the game out, and I'm gonna need you to hit these milestones. So people just don't have the fucking time to really, sit there and fully plan out every nook and cranny.
Well,
So
let's look at like Yakuza, which Yakuza, all right, there's plenty of emptiness to Yakuza 2, but one of the best things about it is like, yes, it is open world, but it's a very small space that's open world.
right.
And so it feels packed.
Well, it's dense.
Right, yeah, dense. That's what I like. I would rather a smaller world that is dense than a bigger. It's why like Starfield, I'm real excited for it, but
Real excited for 10% of Starfield.
well, I mean, 10%, that's pretty jam-packed speaking on a universe level. But that is something that does scare me is like where I'm like, oh, scare is the wrong word, but like where
You have Game Pass, you have nothing to be worried about.
yeah, that's true. But it's like eh, I have trepidation for the fact that like it's so fucking big. They're talking about how big it is, and it's like, yeah, right. But like, if there's nothing to do in 90% of the fucking like, I'm just not gonna go there. There's no point in building
Yeah.
any of that shit.
Oh, you could set up some mining equipment. I'm like, bro,
Right. Like, that's gonna be cool the first
that's not exciting.
5 times,
But
maybe?
this, I want to throw back to what Obsidian did and came out with were for Avowed, where they're like, yeah, it's like we had this idea that we might want to, we thought maybe we tackle like an Elder Scroll style game, but then we decided very early on that we didn't want to do that. And then once we were bought by Microsoft, we're like, well, what's the fucking point? Like
Mhm.
we're gonna be making two fucking first person, Elder Scrolls games? No, no. So they
Right.
decided they said when they went into production of the game, they literally did what they did for Outer Worlds instead, where they're like, we decided to make it a much smaller but denser game. Like so Avowed is just basically like it's not saying that the game has like it's not linear. It's just saying that like no, it's just a much smaller scale world, but it's much denser.
Well,
So
what's one of the biggest improvements from Mass Effect 1 to Mass Effect 2?
was getting rid of the buggy shit.
Right. It made the
I think
world it made it smaller but more dense. There was more intention to where
if
you went
if
and
if
why
you
you did
know
it.
when you ask that question, that's probably one of the better examples of Mass Effect 1, where it's kind of like we have planets that are fucking worthless.
Right. You can spend hours accidentally going to a bunch of planets that have nothing the fuck on them. Which,
Yeah.
hey, great realism. The 90% of the planets on in the universe are probably fucking pointless to go to. But I don't play games because I want realism.
Yeah.
um yeah, if I'm making one clear case against open world in Final Fantasy or open world in general, it's that I want, especially in this day and age where we have the technology to have dense intentionally built worlds, I want intention, I want focus, and I want
Yeah.
density. Those are the things that I think can be done better when you're not trying to build open world, when you're just
And
trying to build.
and I think it benefited people like Sony greatly for God of War.
Yeah.
Some people have actually complained that Spider-Man 2 uses some of the same locations. I'm like, it's fucking New York.
Yeah, how many
The f
differences do you
the
want there to
fuck?
be?
Like, yes, they're opening it up, so I think the first game was just Manhattan, and then this one will have the Queens and Bronx or something as well.
Okay.
So they're like, "Yeah, we got a little bit more of the city you can explore." But some people were, like, posting, like, areas in that gameplay clip where they're like, "This is the same area from the first game. It only looks marginally better." I'm like, "It's fucking New York City. What the fuck are they supposed to fucking do?" Like,
And I would argue that a lot of those places probably look marginally worse today in real life.
ah, Well, you're right.
New York
Exactly.
only ages. It doesn't.
And that's like the weird thing too, because I mean, like Spider-Man is technically sort of open world, but like I was also kind of saying, because I remember like when Max was saying about how much he likes Spider-Man and like he doesn't really like open world, and I'm like, Spider-Man's barely open world. It's just because here's the thing, Spider-Man in Marvel Spider-Man, you don't have a variety of vehicles to acquire, hijack, buy. You don't
Mhm.
go you don't go into every building. You can barely go into any buildings. You only really go into buildings for like stealth segments or puzzle segments or whatever, like story segments, right?
Mhm.
It's not a go whatever, go wherever, do whatever you want. Like the game is not this sort of like Spider-Man can just do whatever. No, it's like Spider-Man's hanging out and he responds to side quests for people, or people getting mugged or whatever, or he does the story progression. It's barely open world. It's just no, it's almost like not even open world in a way where it's like, well, here's Manhattan,
It's
and then
sandboxed.
you basically, yeah, like you do what you're called to do
Right.
either as a side quest or as a main quest. So it's not like it's not this true form freedom where it's like the true form freedom is like GTA and Saints Row, and stuff like, and even honestly, even Skyrim to an extent where it's just kind of like there is a story and there is a crit path, but like you're kind of like free to do whatever the fuck you want whenever the fuck you want.
Right. The Witcher 3, Red Dead Redemption 2, where it's like you can do everything but the main story and still spend hundreds of hours. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I put 100 hours into it and never even went halfway through the main story, basically.
Right.
Um, all good examples of a big open world where you have so much to do that you almost forget you've got to do the main story.
And I
Um,
think option fatigue is real. And
yes,
that happened real hard in Red Dead, and it happened, what was the other game recently? There was like there was just too many options. There was like I think it was Assassin's Creed possibly. Where it's like there's just too much stuff to do. Like I'm fatigued by choice
right.
here. So I'm like,
you're
nothing's getting
you're
done.
doing so much other stuff by the time that you're ready to move on or that you have to move on in the main story, you're already burned out on the game. You've already played the shit out of the game.
It happened a little bit with Zelda actually, where I basically said like there's all these things you can do and discover. I'm like, ugh, whatever. I'm just doing the main story, and I just decided because the game at least
Right.
has like very go to these 4 points to do the main story. I'm like, all right, fuck it, I'm doing this. I don't care about anything else.
Now, I do think that there is something where it's like if it's the only game, say you're 15 and it's the only game you're going to get for months on months, so sick.
You
So
know
sick
how
to have a
much
game.
child me would have loved getting Tears of the Kingdom,
Right.
and how much that would have sufficed me for so much longer than the 2D platformers I had did.
Right. And so to like end on a positive note for open world, there is a lot of great things about open world. Um I like open world. I really do. I just think that like if I'm making a case against it for Final Fantasy, I don't think Final Fantasy is the game for open world. I don't think they've ever wanted to be really an open world game, and I don't think that there's any argument for making it open world necessarily.
True open world, true
Yeah,
open
yeah,
world
true
Final
open world.
Fantasy is to me is like you'd have to that'd have to be that'd have to be the idea from the start. But even then, I would almost feel like it would work for a spin-off. Like if you wanted to do a spin-off Final Fantasy title that was true open world, because they did that for a Souls game. They did Strangers of Paradise, which was a Dark Souls spin-off of Final Fantasy, right? I
Oh,
could
right. Yeah.
I could see them doing a spin-off, a bit, granted it would cost a lot of money. Spin-offs are risky, whatever. But if like it to me would fit more if you did true open or like Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead style, like true open, no pressure or obligation to really to do
Right.
quest line, like just kind of just live and dick around the world. And people will argue 14 is already that, and fair point, but it is a subscription service based game.
Yeah, I don't. So whenever I think of like MMOs, yes, MMOs are technically all open world, and that's fair. I'm not including them.
Is
When I
it
say
it's a subscription service game. I mean, we're talking like a game, yeah, you buy it, you pay $70 for it, and then you take it home, and that's the game, right?
yeah, and you
Like
got 100 hours, 200 hours,
I think
unlimited hours of
I
roam around.
think a spinoff would work very well.
Hmm.
In as you could even take any one of the past 16 fucking Final Fantasy games and say we're going to make an open world spinoff sort of semi-sequel or just whatever.
Give me Final Fantasy VII Remake combat in an open world Midgar.
Like a true open world Midgar.
Yeah. And all I'm in is that city, but it's dense and it's truly open world, and I'm doing missions
I
in the
feel like
story
that's opening a wound for me because like that's what I
because that's what we
thought.
wanted.
That's
That's
what I
what we
thought
wanted.
they
Yeah.
said at E3 when they're like,
Yeah.
"You're gonna explore all of Midgar," blah blah blah. Like
Yeah.
it felt like they were opening up. I'm like, oh, but we're really not. We're going to like one extra area, one or two
Right.
extra areas. Fuck.
Right.
It
Yeah.
wasn't what it wasn't. I literally, it wasn't what I thought they were saying. Like what the presentation people were saying on stage did not match up the reality in my brain.
Well, I think in that situation, it was because they were like, "Oh yeah, this one's only going to be Midgar." I think the assumption was like, "Oh, then we're going to get to go all over Midgar," and so the thought was like, "Oh, it'll be like a mini open. It'll be like Yakuza, but in Midgar."
Right. And it
And that would be
kind of
fucking great.
like it kind of was for the little bits that were there, like the wall market area felt like a
Yeah,
Yakuza game, but it felt like a Yakuza game for a very for the very small portion of the city you got to run around in.
an hour. Any final thought on a case against open world for Final Fantasy or open world in general?
I think the thing is just like again, the case against it is like don't film your movie without a script. Don't make your game without a plan.
Right.
If your plan is to have open world and that's just it, that's not a plan. Because open world
Well, that's
is
how you get Cyberpunk.
yeah, like open world is not something you can just sit there and like, oh, we're gonna go this way with it. This is what the
Mhm.
game like the case for and I'm actually not so much a fan of open world. I'm actually much more of a fan of wide linear because like Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3 is wide linear. Xenoblade X is true open world. You start the game, they tell you go to the city, nah, and you can like literally go the entire surface of the planet
Right,
on
and
your own.
you almost didn't do the story for the first 100 hours you played of that game,
Right,
right?
like shit like that. Yes, and that happened to like a lot of people who played that game. They just went out exploring. And it's actually kind of great for that, but it also suffered too because why is it like the least selling besides being on the Wii U? Why is it sort of like not held in the high regard? The rest of it because like the rest of the storytelling and narrative suffered greatly for it because they spent all their time trying to make sure this open world runs correctly, right?
Right, and it's hard to have intention when the idea of your game is you can go anywhere, do anything. It's really hard to have pointed story elements and
Right.
intention behind your gameplay. Um, I will say that that's something that like I'm really enjoying about 16 is that yes, it's maybe I would say it's more hallway than open linear.
Yeah.
Definitely. But it feels very pointed. Like it feels like the story's moving and like I'm constantly in it.
Yeah.
One thing that I was worried about when I heard about the side quest thing is I was like, "Oh fuck, you're going to have to do like hours of side quests to move on." And you don't. And it's great. You don't
So,
have to
side
grind, you
quests
don't have to do any of that
barely
shit.
even give you the XP to make them worth it.
Right.
You can mostly ignore them. Honestly, it's kind of crazy. They're kind of
Yeah.
great actually,
Yeah.
because then you
Uh
realize you could just don't do them.
yeah, I love it. I love that you don't have to do that.
I think really at the end of the day, the end of the day for me, real world is have a plan before you make it.
Right.
Have the thing and don't not just designed, but like world like have your world built up. Like have a reason and sort of a plan for every part and aspect of that map before you start rendering and creating the map.
Mm.
I mean, I think that's the most important thing really for open world is that like, you don't want your open world to feel like an excuse to make your game seem bigger than it is. Like
Yeah, I agree with that.
make it feel organic because it's and that's real. I mean, honestly, that's the hardest thing to do is just making your open world feel organic and like it's meant to be this way. And it's not just a series of like I randomly place NPCs and checkpoints, and
Well,
quests just all
that's
around
always
here.
the problem with Bethesda games is like there's a lot of randomly placed. Like some of the bigger cities will feel like very cool and again intentional, like where
Hmm.
there's a plan. But then there'll be like random villages in the middle of nowhere that's just like they were like, and we took this cookie cutter village and we just and here's the town drunk, and here's
And
the guard who
that's
took an
why I
arrow to
think,
me.
like, honestly, it's fine if you don't even have as many villages, if you don't
Right.
have as many towns, because you just hyper focused on making the towns you did plan really dense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, so hit us up with that, especially if you have ideas for side quests. You're a patron who wants us to dive deeper on something maybe that we talked about in this episode. Leave a comment in the YouTube video or tweet at us. There's a billion different ways to get at us, so get at us. And as always, we've got patrons to thank. If you want to become a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames podcast. Dude of the week was Toten. Thank you, Toten. And our producers for this episode are Mutton Chops Johnson, the Pink Hammer, the Schmidt One, Scrunami, Koroi35, Hyperviper89, and Ziggy Z. Thank you, dudes, and we'll catch you next time.
Later, dudes.